Hey everyone, well, thanks for joining us. Me and Ross again. We're going to be going into some of the products that Starco Brands has to offer. We're going to be kicking it off first with Breathe. But first things first, Ross, how are you?
Doing good, thanks. How's Canada?
Canada's good, honestly. Some decent weather, but we're good. I mean, talk to me about Breathe. I mean, where do you want to kick it off? I'll let you intro the product if you'd like.
Really the concept behind the Breathe product line, because we've been really sort of a pioneer in the field of aerosols for many years, and so our original kind of thesis is that early 2000s there was some consensus in the market where aerosols were becoming a little bit out of vogue. Um, And if you want to really go back in the 70s, there was actually CFCs that were used inside aerosols as part of the propellants, and those were ozone depleting. And so CFCs have been illegal to use for many years. And so the basis of what makes an aerosol work is whatever you're trying to spray, whether it's, a sunscreen, a cooking spray, a spray paint, underarm deodorant, spray glue, spray paint, whatever it is, automotive, most utilize something called a hydrocarbon propellant. What is that? It's essentially a gas, butane, propane, things in your barbecue tank. And there's a scale of these gases. So on one side of the scale, you have butane, and they measure that scale by how much pressure those gases innately have. So if you were to put it in an enclosed vessel, like a tank per se, when you inject that gas into that enclosed vessel, it's actually liquid, right, inside the vessel. And then when you, let's say on your barbecue tank, when you turn the nozzle and the gas escapes, as soon as it hits ambient air, it turns into a gas. There's a phase change. And that gas, as it goes up, is flammable and you can light it. So butane is on the pressure scale, PSI scale, is 17 pounds per square inch. And then you have a bunch of other gases all along the way. And then the other end of the spectrum is propane, which is 108 PSI, tons of pressure. And so what the aerosol guys do is, depending on what you're spraying, different products have different viscosities, different products need to be sprayed differently, some need to be very fine atomization, some need to be thicker. And so they blend those gases to get the right pressure. You have a little bit of butane, a little protein, you blend it. So that's really what's inside of it. So, spray paint may have, 60% this and 40% that, and then you get the optimal spray. And so the aerosol guys have to kind of not only formulate whatever you're spraying, that formulation, but also formulate the gas so you get the most optimal spray. Now, the issue with that is that, society has benefited from that over time because you have a lot of great tools, whether it's paint or this and that, whatever, and you have tools to use. The government came in and said, okay, well, we have to limit the amount of emissions that are going out. And so the EPA says, okay, well, there's certain regulation of how much emissions can go out. And they set different regulations for different products. And there's a federal standard, and then there's a state standard, and then certain states are more rigid or they have lower thresholds than others. Like California is the most rigid, or Canada and California are similar, where you have to have the lowest VOC emissions per se. So as someone in the air circuit, you have to formulate to meet the efficacy requirements of the product, but also the regulatory. Okay. Now, all these hydrocarbon gases are carbon footprinting, and that's an issue. And so, early on in the game, we said, we'd like to see if we can start to transition a lot of these aerosols into products where we can formulate the liquids so that they can be used with things like just compressed air. And that was a real far stretch, because you had basically 50, 60, 70 years of an industry that had formulated products that were compatible with hydrocarbon gases to be sprayed. So you couldn't just rip out the hydrocarbon gas and throw in air, because that wasn't compatible. So you had to retool the whole formula. It's tons of R&D work to go through millions and millions of products. But we are disruptors, and we're up for that challenge, and we were very young in the industry, and I saw a ton of white space. And so we started to do that in a lot of different product categories, but one very specifically is in this line of Breathe. And so we have an affiliate company called Chase Products out of Chicago, which is really a fascinating company. They're a contract manufacturer of aerosol products. They've they're literally credited with essentially, you know, inventing the aerosol. I mean, they were right at sort of the crux of when the aerosol was really being invented in the 20s. Huge legacy. And so they were like very early in hairspray and very early in shave cream and spray paints. And they developed a cleaning line that was powered by air. And they really did it for the sort of the janitorial sector, because these were the people that were using it 8 hours a day and air quality and whatnot. And so they really pioneered these formulas. And so obviously we saw a tremendous application in the consumer markets as well. And so that's kind of how Breathe was born. And so really, what is Breathe, right? So you have traditional household cleaning products that, you know, people use every day: a bathroom cleaner, a multi-purpose cleaner, a furniture polish, a stainless steel cleaner, and there's others to come, glass cleaner, et cetera, et cetera. And they were formulated to be to meet and exceed the performance of, let's say, the national brand equivalents. So who are we really competing against? You're competing against all the, you know, the big players, whether it's Rick Benkiser or the Clorox guys or the SCJs. Those are the guys that really own that shelf space in the aerosol world from a branded standpoint. The Lysols of the world, all great products, have been in existence for a really long time. Now, 99% of them are propelled with hydrocarbon propellants. And so that's kind of all sacred ground for these multi-billion dollar players. And so it's very difficult to even penetrate and have something competitive on the shelf, because the retail corporate buyers are going to say, well, you know, a lot of these guys are category captains and it's tough to innovate in that sector. So they've just kind of owned that real estate for a long time. So all of a sudden Breathe comes around, and Breathe is equal performance shown by third-party testing labs. Okay, equal performance, no hydrocarbon propellants. So you lose the flammability, you improve the air quality. And the juices in those products are biodegradable. So you're checking all these boxes that these products aren't checking, but you're also checking the efficacy boxes that they are as well. One step further, if you take a look at the aesthetics of all those products, the designs have really been very similar for decades and decades, right? And so now you have something with a very kind of on-trend design that resonates with kind of a younger buyer, speaks, you know, is the messaging of the packaging is screaming a different message. You know, again, I think we've used this terminology before. I really think of this product as like a smart cut, not a shortcut, a smart cut, right? Better than what's there, but also not without any sacrifice. And so then what happens is that you say, okay, well, you're safer, you're just as efficacious, the design is more on trend, the pricing is the same, if not very similar, and it's got all these environmental and safety, you know, attributes to it. And so it's a little bit of a better mousetrap. And so what you can do now is you can take the aerosol, because it's no longer the same environmental concern, et cetera, and safety concern as the rest of them. And you can then go to other products in cleaning that are competitive, like trigger sprays and stuff like that. And you can say, finally, you can let the aerosol attributes stand on their own 2 feet. In other words, people started to migrate over to trigger spray products in cleaning because they thought it was more environmental than having these spray products. But the efficacy of spray products was better. It's the same concept of saying you're cleaning your car with a pressure washer or a hose. So you can do kind of a trigger, or you can go with an aerosol, and the coverage rates go up and the speed of application goes up and the cleaning is more efficacious, and it's firing the product into the substrate so you can get a deeper clean. You have all these attributes of this spray, but you had some of the downstrokes of, you know, safety and environmental and so on and so forth. So once you cured all that, you can now let the aerosol stand on its own 2 feet and say, hey, it's better all the way around. And so it can compete on both sides of the category with all the aerosols and trigger sprays. And that was the positioning of Breathe. So once that was all kind of curated for its strategy, we then, you know, went to the EPA and said, you know, this product, you know, when it was developed by our partners Chase, it met all the requirements of a program the EPA has called the EPA Safer Choice Program. And if you prove that it meets all their requirements, then they will certify you. and it'll stamp. And right on the can, if you look at the Breathe can, you'll see approved by the EPA Safer Choice Program. It became the first aerosol in history to garner the approval. And that was a huge accomplishment by the Chase team. And then what we did, once we took the product and we started to convert it, not only, yes, it was very applicable for the janitorial market, but now into the consumer landscape. Once we did that and really positioned it in the way it was positioned, the EPA then tapped us and gave us the EPA Partner of the Year. And that product won the EPA Safer Choice Partner of the Year, which was a huge feather in the product line's cap. So once we were sort of garnering to pick up these awards, and then it picked up some other awards as we launched it. It was an early launch in 2018. It picked up that year Cleaning Magazine Award, Mother's Choice Award. It picked up a bunch of awards back then. There was a bunch of press releases that came out, but it was early days as we were launching the product. And then we started to really focus on, okay, well, who's very applicable for its distribution? And we immediately launched with some really niche-y, kind of great retailers. There's a retailer out east called Wegmans, which is like 100 stores, very high-end, great high-end customers looking for these kinds of products, very conscious of what goes in their home, want clean label kind of products. And so we kind of launched there. And then we brought on a several billion-dollar distributor called UNFI that really penetrates a lot of street level and grassroots level, smaller distributors, regional places that have, 60 markets here or 70 markets here or 100 here. They also do a lot with like Whole Foods and so on and so forth, but it's a great launching point for products like this. And then we started to go a lot bigger, and we started to go into like, the Home Depots of the world. And we did some distribution on one of the SKUs with Walmart, and we started to put it into Lowe's. And then as the product started to garner shelf space and recognition, we then were able to do a very significant deal with Hearst Media. And Hearst Media, they're the proprietors of the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval. The Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval is one of the most globally recognized seals for consumer products, started in, I think, 1918. They have the Good Housekeeping Research Institute. So it's very well known as, one of the largest vetting institutes out there for consumer products. And so this product got the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval and became really the first in its category to do so. And, it's been showcased now in, everything from women's health and men's health and Women's Day, and it's had a great trajectory. And just from a numbers vantage point, so for our first year when we launched, the total gross revenue of that product, and some of our other product lines were kind of mixed in there as well. I'm not 100% sure on the breakup in there, but you're coming out of the gates, you roughly had somewhere around $2 million in gross sales of kind of all of what Starco Brands had in that first year, and a big majority of it was Breathe. And so kind of 19 was your first full year of sales, which was nice to sort of come out of the gates like that from a corporate vantage point. But if you take a look at the global corporate sales from 2020 standpoint, you're sitting at, it's tipping on 5 million. So you can kind of see where the run rate is as you start to push through your distribution and push through some of your marketing and push through some of that branding. So we're on a really interesting trajectory now. So that kind of takes, so you have this umbrella of Breathe. And it was our belief that brand has tremendous elasticity, right? So Breathe can live in a variety of different categories. And the headliner of kind of this clean aerosol technology is really the underbelly. And so we started to really think about where else it pivots, and we had significant intellectual property in the hygiene market in hand sanitizers. And, as COVID started to hit, in some of our other divisions on the private label side, we've been making hand sanitizers for years. So you started to see the demands really, really spike early on. And we had some intellectual property that we had developed where it was really the first hand sanitizer that was ever sprayed in an aerosol that was propelled by just compressed air. And so we have a patent pending on that technology. And so it comes in a whole bunch of different sizes. This is kind of your travel size. But essentially, the idea is that it's clean aerosol technology. It's 75% alcohol. The product has gone through all the FDA testing, which is available at breathesanitizer.com under the testing tab. Shows all the organisms and pathogen that it kills. And then afterwards, we had it tested to see if it kills COVID-19. And it passed that test with flying colors. And so, you know, that was a very big kind of moment for us because the hand sanitizer market got kind of polluted. You know, the FDA sort of dropped the bar for typically if you're going to make hand sanitizer, you have to have a pharmaceutical facility. And so there wasn't enough production to meet the demands because the demands were so high. So they sort of dropped the bar somewhat, and they said, okay, well, if you have, you know, personal care facilities or a beverage facility or an alcohol, you guys can make it too. And that's why you see all these distilleries making product. But the QC and the QA kind of went down, and you had some products that they did recalls on and so on and so forth. So there was sort of this flood in the marketplace. So you really wanted to make sure that if you were going to put something out, that you really had the third-party efficacy testing to really come, you know, especially because we're making it in our pharmaceutical facility, which is under the auspices of a regulation called CFR 210-211 under the FDA. And so that's a really big deal to be able to produce those in that facility. But it fits so well with the Breathe line because it's compressed air and it's a very clean formula. And so, you know, we're also the first to come out with a travel size of this nature. And then having that product kind of dovetail also into the Good Housekeeping seal meant that it had to be tested by that initiative well, and it did, and it was passed. So right now you kind of have these two umbrellas of, you know, household and hygiene and personal care. And so, and you know, we've got a significant pipeline of where else we think it lives and breathes, no pun intended. And so, you know, we're super excited about the line. We're super excited about the disruption, the positioning, the aesthetics, and obviously the intellectual property in can.
Cool. So a few things. I'll give you a little breather. The couple questions I'd love to go over. You amazing job doing the science. I thought it was really cool. You had PSI here, PSI of this. You know, I'm curious as to, you know, a little bit more of the science with compressed air, but also what stops another company from using compressed air?
No, I think that if another company is out there and they really want to put the R&D into utilizing compressed air, they can. The issue isn't can they or can't they. The issue is they have to retool the formula. So if you had some, you know, formula that was using, you know, solvents and environmentally destructive or, you know, what would be considered to be a non-safe label ingredients, and that was the same formula that you were utilizing your hydrocarbon propellant in, and you were just going to take that formula and throw it into compressed air, there'd be major compatibility issues and product stability issues and spray issues and viscosity issues. So you have to retool both. So there's an R&D challenge, and everybody is free to do their own R&D in this world for sure. And on the household cleaning side, you know, the science of curating water-based cleaning formulas is I don't want to say public domain, but it's almost public domain. There's tons of them. Any trigger spray product is basically a water-based. So there's applicability to do that. The only thing is that you need the infrastructure to be able to produce those kinds of aerosols, which is a little bit of a different production process than stereotypical aerosols, a little bit different. And so you need to have that infrastructure to be able to compete with the big boys at those economics. So there is capability for those people to compete. So on the household cleaning line, you know, where's the intellectual property, right? The intellectual property is really in the curation of formulas from a water-based standpoint and a compressed air standpoint that are just as efficacious as their solvent-borne and hydrocarbon brethren on shelf. And that was very difficult to do. That took like many, many years. So there's a lot of proprietary kind of know-how and execution there. So that's kind of on the household side. On the spray hand sanitizer side, we have a patent. No one's ever curated a powered by air aerosol with hand sanitizer in this kind of concentration and format that had this kind of efficacy that had never been done before. So that was completely novel. And what's fascinating about that is that Starco Brands is all about behavior change. And so if we can take somebody in the household cleaning category that has trigger sprays and they're trigger spraying, and you get things like finger fatigue if you have to do large surfaces and the efficacy is questionable, or you have, you know, not so clean other traditional aerosols, the behavior change is now you can have your cake and eat it too. Safe and efficacious. There's the behavior change, and recognized by the EPA Safer Choice Program and Partner of the Year and Good Housekeeping seal of approval. There's kind of the disruption in the behavior change. On the personal care side and the hygiene side, I mean, if you think about hand sanitizer, you know, it's squirt, you know, gel, rub in, sort of sticky, dry it off, and you're off and running. But it's not the kind of thing where you're going to see many people squirting gel on their hands and like rubbing down 100 people, right? That's just not, it's a very intimate kind of product. It's a self-application kind of product, hand sanitizer. This is the first time that the user base, the communities that can actually take the can and turn it away from themselves and not have it be such a self-applicating intimate product. They can actually be a helpful, progressive participant in sanitizing the people in the environment around them. And they haven't been able to do that before. Now, you can use things like disinfectants, EPA registered disinfectants. You can spray hard surfaces and disinfect and clean it, but you can't use them on your skin. There's a level of toxicity that's not designed to be used on the skin. So this is a product that is skin safe. So, you know, mom or dad can take their 3 kids and say, okay, line up kids, and spray them all down. And so you can be extremely active in hand sanitizing and sanitizing skin, whereas before you really didn't have the tool set to do that.
Yeah, and proven it kills COVID. I thought that was a pretty cool twist that you guys
Yeah.
actually did that testing. That's awesome. But either way, so here, final question before we wrap things up. You know, tell me and tell people, you know, what's next for Breathe, you know, whether it's the hand sanitizer or all the other stuff, all the different cleaners that you guys have. What's the next step to get it to, you know, from, we're at 5 mil, give or take, who knows how much of that is all Breathe or whatever, but how do we get that to 50 mil, 100 mil? What's the next stage?
Yeah, so, you know, we're kind of year 2 out of the gates. And we're just starting to plug in our large media partners in Hearst and Good Housekeeping and through their platforms, and also our strategic partnerships on the media side and marketing side as well, both those sides. And so as we now start to fulfill and roll out into the big boxes, you know, Home Depot is really now setting its full feet into that distribution, as well as into Lowe's. And so as the company, you know, starts to garner more strength and accrete more capital, we start to roll that. You have to roll it out in a very controlled fashion. You don't want to roll it out too fast because you've got inventory risk, you got media risk, you want to hit certain sell-through. So there's a slow build to be able to grow that distribution. And we start to take larger and larger tranches of the capital earned that goes back into media, which is really what the retailers want to see to really support that pull through. So, you know, the question isn't sort of, okay, well, you're here and what do we got to do to get to 50 million? You want to make sure that the run rate is meeting all goals. And so to come, yes, there is a division of how much of that total revenue is Breathe that we can drill down on. But ostensibly, if you kind of came out of the gates and, you know, were able to fulfill sort of distribution in that sort of $2 million range in your first year, and then you're able to kind of have something that almost really more than doubles it in your second year, you know, if you wanted to maintain that path, which is an aggressive path, you know, you can do the matriculation to whatever number you think the company's going to get there. But doubling your growth every single year is not a simple thing to do. But these are kind of the years that you can expect that sort of growth, because what happens is that if you start to continue to roll out to the retailers and roll out to the distribution, you know, you're going to land whatever it is, a Home Depot, and you're going to have 1,800 stores. You're going to land another Lowe's and you're going to have another 1,000 stores. you're going to really start to push. So you get the brand awareness where it makes sense to then go into your Targets, Walmarts, to take a look at the club distribution when you're ready for a Costco, a Sam's, a BJ's. We're not ready for that kind of distribution yet. There's different margin profile that's associated with it. There's different pack out requirements. You know, if you're going to do a deal with a Costco or whatever, they're going to say, well, we want a different size and we want a 2-pack and we want this margin, and yeah, we'll do it. But your opening order is going to be, so there's very large production constraints too. So you have to roll out in a very strategic path. You have to build your marketplace and build your branding. And the stronger you build it in the early days, the more value you accrete to the line. Don't forget that products in the personal care and in the CPG space, household cleaning, etc., when brands get built and cemented at that, and you can start to take them past that sort of $10 million in growth and in revenue, when you start to pass that, if you ever take a look at the valuation of those lines, what valuation meaning, what would they divest for? What would you sell that to larger CPG for? You start to take a look at revenues, not traditionally what we base valuations on, which is revenues of, say, EBITDA, multiples of EBITDA. It's more about they transact for multiples of revenue. So ostensibly, if you get to, $50 million of revenue, that product line and that brand, could be potentially worth 15 million times 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you want to take a look at valuation of the value you're creating in that brand. And the more that value grows, the more options you have out there for potential strategic partnerships, or if it makes sense from a corporate vantage point to divest and have that capital return to the company and reuse in some of our other product categories, you're going to make those good decisions as you go along. But the key is to really create brand value, distribution, and then check all the boxes to make sure that you got a great product line. Intellectual property, disruption, branding, positioning, all the distribution, all the manufacturing. You really want to make sure you have all that covered. And so it's not this race to get to sales of 50 million, because that's actually dangerous. You have to do that in a controlled fashion. But it's along the way to recognize the value that you're accreting to the business.
Yeah. No, cool. Good answer. Honestly, obviously Breathe, extremely interesting. Anything you think we missed that you want to mention about the product before, of course, next week we hop into your other brands?
Yeah. The only thing that I'll say about Breathe is there's a lot of other product categories to go.
Okay. I like the teaser.
Yes.
Well, awesome. Well, we'll leave it there. Obviously, a awesome, exciting product. Ross, thanks for hopping on. And next week we can decide if we want to do the popcorn or kind of this suntan.
If we do the popcorn, you better have a bowl, and I hope you have product up there, because it's the only way to do it.
I promise you, I will have a bowl of popcorn next time we do our chat. All right.
Awesome.
Well, hey, Ross, thanks.